We're basically going to pay people to have babies. I'm serious. We're going to pay people quite a lot of money to have babies, because otherwise we are going to have an economic disaster on our hands.
You could make having children as financially as comfortable as possible within this current society as it's currently structured, but you're still not dealing with all those fears and other stresses that lay outside of the government.
So, Sophie, you hinted at this at the end of your last answer. What is it we might need to do in terms of the way we think about parenting to make it less onerous, to make the ups feel more up and the downs feel less down?
Well, that's a bit, I mean, I must be quite fortunate, because so my parents tell me, like, they actually, because they had me later on in life, and initially they thought, we'll have our fun first. And this is actually what they told me, which is obviously exactly what you wanted. We will have our fun life first, and then we'll have children. But fortunately, the experience, obviously I was such a wonderful child, it was an epiphany for them, because consequently they've come to say that, okay, yes, they lost a lot of the sort of freedoms that you enjoy when you are single, but they discovered a whole load of new kind of freedoms and pleasures and, you know, forms of creating a relationship that were challenging and interesting. And so in some ways, I think one thing we can start by doing is, there's an implicit sort of theme through this, that parenting is a very noble thing to do, but it's always going to be onerous. And if we can get out of it, we could have had the birth control all those years ago, then the world, it would be a very, very different picture. And I sort of, okay, so I wonder, and relating this back to my previous answer, why has the fun gone out of being around young people so much? And a lot of that is to do with the fact that some of my fellow panelists have already mentioned, that at some point there became a real kind of narrative and all that sort of industry around how to do parenting correctly. And, you know, Dr. Spock, it's all his fault. You know, all these endless books about what you should be doing to your child and when. Now, in some ways it's double-edged, isn't it? Because, you know, this was a part of a kind of outpouring, a flourishing of the social sciences, and all, you know, that wonderful kind of Parkinson's law, the number of ways to raise children increase exponentially with the number of child psychologists that have just graduated from university, sort of thing. So there's huge amounts of pressure, but then also think of what I mean, one of the things which terrifies me and puts me off the idea of having children is I would have to deal with a school system I find terrifying and horrifying, frankly. And you know, and that the whole joy of having this little person who you're introducing to the world would be reduced down to this sort of battle to drag them through a system which is basically doing violence to them as a young person.
Okay. So we've got to see thesis. You know, so David, I'm putting you in charge of a marketing campaign, marketing campaign to get more people to have children. What's going to be at the heart of that marketing campaign? You're also allowed to change laws and things like that.
Right. We're basically going to pay people to have babies. I'm serious. We're going to pay people quite a lot of money to have babies, because otherwise we are going to have an economic disaster on our hands. It's already a huge drag on our economies. And we won't have a welfare state in 20 years' time unless we start raising the birth rate or increasing immigration, but we already have massively high immigration. It's creating huge political ructions. And immigration, particularly if it's from outside the European Union, which most of it is these days, is also very, very bad for the environment, because you're taking people from low carbon footprint countries, on the whole, and taking them to rich countries which have much bigger carbon footprints. So 1950s, I want to just dwell on the 1950s. Nobody wants to go back to the 1950s. You know, the breadwinner, homemaker, decayed. Although incidentally, Sophie was saying how much anxiety there was at the time. Well, the 1950s was also, as many of you know, the era of the baby boom. We got up to nearly 3 children per woman. I mean, it would be an absolute miracle if we could do that today. So if anxiety about the bomb is a factor, perhaps anxiety about global warming might make us have more children. It doesn't seem to be having that effect.
But music was also better in the 1950s, and coincidence?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, two figures. Two British social attitude figures. Only 9% of the British population believe the statement, a man should go out to work and a woman should primarily look after the home and children. Only 9% of the British public believe that. But also another 9%, when asked about the best arrangements for bringing up children, only 9% of people say both parents working full time. Well, actually in the UK today, about 35% of all parents are working full time. This creates huge stresses on families, absolutely enormous stresses. And I think this is one of the contributors to what is called the fertility gap. If you look at what parents, young women and young men say they want in terms of the number of children, it would be well over 2. And we end up with 1.4 and going south. And one of the reasons for this, I think, is that for all of the sort of general cultural and freedom issues, is that we don't have any family policy in this country. We're way worse than many other countries, which incidentally also do have terrible fertility rates, but still we could do a lot better. I mean, our family policy is essentially making it easier for both parents to spend less time in the family. It's essentially childcare. That's what our family policy is. So we should start by having governments that actually say, having babies is actually quite a good thing, like they do in France and lots of other places in Europe. We should recognize the family in the tax system. We don't do that. It was actually thanks to Margaret Thatcher, who was often considered anti-feminist. Actually, she wasn't. She was a classic second-wave feminist. She looked down her nose on women who stayed at home to look after children. When we introduced individual taxation of husbands and wives, we got rid of the extra 50% tax allowance that men used to have, the so-called married man's tax allowance. That was got rid of. Nigel Lawson wanted to bring it back in another form, and Margaret Thatcher said, no, we're not doing it. We should have a home care allowance, £10,000 a year for one parent, make it easier for one parent to stay at home when children are preschool. This would be incredibly popular and it would be relatively easy to finance.
David, what proportion of if that happened, what proportion do you think of the people who took that up would be women as against men?
It would be majority women, but more and more men would be doing it too, as women become the main earner in many households. And men, by the way, are stepping up. I mean, so the answer to, we've been hopeless. As we've moved from the 1950s, the breadwinner homemaker model, as we've moved to the breadwinner part-time worker, and now double breadwinner, often full-time breadwinner model, we've been pretty hopeless at combining the parenthood with work. I mean, we've still got a long way to go, and we've made some progress, and we've still got so much further to go. But if we could, just for those preschool years, we would reach, because our families are an absolute mess in this country. Nearly half of children are not living with their biological parents by the age of 14. 25% of families with dependent children are single parent households. We're not getting this right at all. And the state is not helping in any way. We have, the home care allowance, by the way, you could get up to £10,000 simply by redirecting current flows of money. So we're now spending £9 billion a year on childcare subsidies. If that was given directly to families, they could then choose whether to spend it on themselves or granny or a conventional nursery. And if we front-ended child benefit, child benefit now goes up to the age of 20. If you got say a third of it in the first 4 or 5 years, that would enable us to have, and that would just reduce. It's such a high stress period for these poor families where perhaps both of them are working full time, or one's working full time, the other part time, and they got 2 children and they're trying to climb the greasy pole at work. No wonder so many relationships break up at that time. The state should be trying to make it easier for families to stay together, and then I think that would help a lot with
great. Thank you.
Children.
I'm really interested, Sophie, in how do you respond to David? But also, I'm kind of interested in I think a few years ago, you might have said, well, here are some of the things we might do to encourage women to want more children. We might close the pay gap. We might have more childcare, and we might get men to spend more time with their children. Now, all 3 of those things have happened, and what has actually happened is women want having fewer children, despite all that happening. So I'm interested in your response to David, also why it is that the things that we thought might make a difference really haven't at all.
Sure. Okay, well, my primary response to today, well, it's not directly personal, well, it kind of is.
Oh, go on.
But so a lot of the language that we're hearing or using at the moment is how the state can intervene or how the market and market conditions in the economy. Now, these are important and relevant factors, but my worry is that we're over-focusing on them. And it always concerns me as someone with anarchic sympathies, shall we say, whenever the state wants to get in and start modelling how anything looks. Now, yes, there is some financial facts and sort of, social facts that we need to face, but I think also without quite going down the community raises the child sort of cliche. Nevertheless, I do think, this is a much larger story about how many different spaces and places in society we've lost control of. So I mentioned earlier schools and education. I think you could make having children as financially as comfortable as possible within this current society as it's currently structured, but young people are still not dealing with all those fears and other stresses that lay outside of the government, or are in fact caused by the government, and also the economy, the marketplace. So I think I'd like to hear more about a more holistic view of this, like how we regain much more control over the different spaces of our life. So, that we don't need to wait for the right policies to be in place and the right sets of conditions in order for us to kind of feel comfortable having children. And so again, I suppose, on the one hand, how do we reclaim a lot more control over our communities and our societies, which therefore enable us to shape spaces which we feel comfortable bringing young people into? And then you asked about so why did the factors that we thought would make a difference, why did they not? Well, I think you've got to ask who's asking the questions, who's making these decisions about what it is that people want and need in order to have children, and why isn't the question being asked to us? Why is it always other people that cook all this up, decide all this, and then impose it or imply it upon us, and are astonished when we don't all sort of fall into line and obey? And I think and also there's an awful lot of things which aren't predictable, like. David, you mentioned that the nuclear bomb wasn't enough to kind of put people off children. I think the baby boom sort of run was started in the 40s and in that initial wave after the war and the relief that the war was over. And also I think that the sort of impact of having this permanent existential threat possibly spoke more to a younger generation, and the trajectory went that way. But I think now it is a really serious consideration. There are some major existential threats, like the climate emergency, that frankly, no amount of tweaking the policy is really going to ameliorate.
So, Harvey, I'm going to come to you. You don't need to put your hand up. Where do you stand on David's pro-natalist manifesto?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it as far as I can see, but I don't think, I'm sort of more with Sophie on this, in that I feel that it doesn't really get to the core issues. You can make having children more financially attractive.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below.
With a free trial, you can enjoy the full talk and thousands more.
Thank you for being part of the conversation.